keeping distances is something that can help you. What I always did, it worked for me. I don't know if it works for others, but certainly it worked for me. I always try to be myself during a match, in each moment of the match.
He didn't just control matches, he controlled legends. When Pierluigi Collina stepped onto the pitch, even the most feared players went silent. His stare alone could freeze a stadium. But behind that reputation for perfection was a trail of chaos, furious managers, political battles, and decisions that nearly tore his career apart. This is the story of the world's most respected referee, and the moments that made even football's biggest names fear him. May 14th, 2000, the final day of the Serie A season. Juventus were minutes away from winning the title. All they needed was one more match to go their way. But the sky above Perugia was turning black. Within minutes, the pitch looked more like a swimming pool than a football field. Players couldn't even see the ball bounce, and cameras caught Collina staring at the chaos, deciding what no referee ever wants to decide: stop the biggest game of the year. He blew the whistle and sent both teams to the dressing room. What happened next would make history. For over an hour, Italian TV cut between drenched players and furious Juventus directors demanding answers. Should the match be abandoned, rescheduled, or somehow continued? Collina stood alone in the tunnel, soaked, surrounded by reporters. The league was on the line, and every minute he waited meant another headline. Finally, he made the call: the match would resume, even if it meant players were sliding across puddles. When the whistle blew again, the world saw a surreal sight. Defenders slipping, passes dying in pools of water, and Juventus desperate for a goal, losing every ounce of control. Then, against all odds, Perugia scored, Juventus lost, Lazio won the league. And suddenly, the entire country was screaming Collina's name, half in praise, half in rage. Some called it brave refereeing, others said it was madness. Italian newspapers ran front-page photos of Collina, drenched and unflinching, under headlines like, "The ref who decided the title." Even years later, fans still argue whether he did the right thing. But for Collina, that day became a symbol of what he stood for: absolute independence. No club, no official, no superstar could bend his will. That storm didn't just change a football match, it changed how the world saw Pierluigi Collina. And just when fans thought he couldn't get more controversial, he took control of a match that would make him the most recognizable referee on earth. It was the night football felt like a movie. May 26th, 1999, Barcelona. Bayern Munich were seconds away from being crowned kings of Europe. The crowd was already celebrating when Pierluigi Collina glanced at his watch. 90 minutes were gone, but he didn't blow the whistle. Moments later, Manchester United scored. Then they scored again. 2 goals in stoppage time, and history was rewritten. Bayern players collapsed in disbelief, staring at the man in black who hadn't ended it when they expected. Fans across Europe erupted with one question: why didn't he stop the game sooner? Some swore Collina had given United extra seconds. Others said it was justice, that the time added was perfectly fair. Cameras caught him walking calmly to the center circle, face expressionless while chaos erupted around him. He didn't celebrate, didn't explain. He just enforced the laws of the game with that same cold authority that made players obey before they even spoke. In interviews later, Collina said he didn't give Manchester United a miracle, he gave them the time they had earned. But for millions of Bayern fans, that answer didn't matter. To them, he was the man who stole their trophy. And yet, that night made Collina a legend. His performance, total command under unbearable pressure, became the gold standard for referees everywhere. The man who refused to flinch while the world screamed in disbelief. But as Europe hailed him as untouchable, Collina's next challenge would come on the world's biggest stage, where perfection wasn't enough and even the smallest call could change history. When Collina walked out for the 2002 World Cup final, 70,000 fans roared, not just for the players, but for him. That had never happened before. A referee being cheered like a superstar. It was Brazil versus Germany, Ronaldo versus Khan, pressure at its absolute peak. Yet, in the middle of that chaos, Collina looked like he was carved out of stone. No nerves, no hesitation, just total control. Every decision that night was measured to perfection, firm, fast, and impossible to argue. Even when emotions flared, he handled it with a stare that could silence a crowd. FIFA officials later called it a masterclass in authority. Fans around the world agreed, this was refereeing at its highest level. But behind the calm, Collina later admitted something few people knew: he barely slept the night before. The pressure of a billion eyes on him, the weight of being flawless for 90 minutes, was suffocating. "One mistake," he said, "and you destroy everything you've built in 25 years. That night, he didn't destroy it, he cemented it. Ronaldo scored twice, Brazil lifted the trophy, and Collina walked off the pitch to a standing ovation. Even players hugged him in respect. Yet, as perfect as that night seemed, the years ahead would test him harder than any match. Because the world's most respected referee was about to clash with the one opponent he couldn't control: football politics. By 2005, Pierluigi Collina wasn't just a referee, he was a global icon. His face was on magazine covers, FIFA campaigns, even video games. But fame has a price, and Collina was about to learn how ruthless football politics could be. That summer, he signed a personal sponsorship deal with Opel, one of Europe's biggest car brands. To anyone else, it looked harmless, a referee finally getting credit for the years of discipline and respect he'd earned. But there was a problem. Opel also sponsored AC Milan, one of Italy's most powerful clubs. The Italian Football Federation called it a conflict of interest. Overnight, headlines exploded: Collina in trouble with the FA. For the first time, the man known for control found himself at the center of chaos he couldn't referee. The FIGC told him to drop the deal or give up officiating in Serie A. It was an ultimatum that hit at everything he believed in: independence, fairness, and pride. Collina refused. He stood by his principles, saying a sponsorship didn't change his integrity. "My conscience is clear," he told reporters, but the system didn't care. Within days, the most respected referee in world football was forced to resign from Italy's top division. The football world was stunned, fans protested, journalists called it a witch hunt, and Collina himself walked away in silence. The man who had ruled over legends was taken down not by a bad call, but by a logo on a car. But his story didn't end there, because Collina wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was about to challenge the very system that had pushed him out. Most people would have disappeared after that. Collina didn't. Instead, he turned his battle into a statement. In interviews, he spoke out about how referees were treated, the lack of independence, the politics, the pressure from clubs. He said the quiet part out loud: referees should be protected, not punished for being human. It was rare honesty in a sport that hides everything behind closed doors, and it made people listen. Even FIFA executives used to playing by their own rules couldn't ignore the man who had become the face of fairness itself. In the years that followed, Collina traded the whistle for a different kind of power. He joined UEFA's referees committee, later becoming its chief. Suddenly, the man who once enforced the rules was rewriting them. He pushed for fitness reforms, mental training programs, and one controversial idea that would change football forever: VAR. To some, he became a hero for accountability. To others, the symbol of everything too strict about modern officiating. But Collina didn't flinch. Football must evolve, he said, and so must those who judge it. His war with the system wasn't just about him, it was about what refereeing could be if it were finally respected. And as the years passed, that war gave him something he never expected: redemption. Because while fans still debate his calls from decades ago, they all agree on one thing: without Pierluigi Collina, football would look very different today. But before he became the sport's global enforcer, there was one final test, one that would show how even the most powerful referee could stand completely alone. In Italy, football isn't just a sport, it's religion, and after that storm-soaked match in Perugia, Collina had unknowingly split the country in half. Juventus fans saw betrayal, Lazio fans saw justice, and every talk show, newspaper, and late-night debate turned his name into a battlefield. He'd been called the Angel of Fairness one week, and the man who destroyed the league the next. For months, Collina couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. People shouted at him from cars, newspapers printed editorials demanding investigations, and politicians even used his name in parliament debates. It wasn't just football anymore, it was personal. But here's what made him different: he never fought back. No interviews defending himself, no apologies, just silence. To him, that storm in Perugia wasn't a mistake, it was proof that doing the right thing sometimes makes you the villain. Years later, when asked about that match, Collina simply said, "I couldn't change the weather, but I could change the rules if it meant fairness." That moment standing alone in the rain, while millions watched, became a symbol of what it means to be a referee: invisible when perfect, hated when right. And ironically, it was that same unshakable composure that would carry him far beyond the whistle into shaping how referees around the world would be judged forever. Because Collina wasn't just officiating matches anymore, he was redefining what it meant to be a referee. Pierluigi Collina didn't need a trophy cabinet or a highlight reel. His legacy was built on a stare, a whistle, and a set of decisions that shook football's biggest powers. He was fearless enough to stop a title-deciding match, disciplined enough to face down global pressure, and proud enough to walk away from the sport on his own terms. To some, he was ruthless. To others, a savior of fairness. But to everyone, he was unforgettable. Even now, decades later, players still talk about that look. Fans still debate his calls. And whenever a referee shows true courage, they're compared to one man. Pierluigi Collina, the referee who made the world realize that sometimes the most powerful man on the pitch doesn't even wear a jersey. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which referee moment you'll never forget.